Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the show. Friday edition. Very festive edition today, Megan.
Yeah.
The lights were originally only in there in the control room, but now we get to have a little bit of holiday fun ourselves. It's been a little bit of a chaotic day out on the roads for you, Megan. You got trains, you got accidents, you got cops blocking lanes. How's your day going?
You've heard the burnt toast theory?
No.
It's essentially like if you are running late in the morning and things just aren't going your way, you're trying to get out the door. Next thing you know, your toast pops up, it's burnt. It's like maybe you retoast it and you're delayed a little bit more getting out the door, kind of a thing, or you're scraping it off and you miss something that could have been potentially horrible on the roads.
Ooh.
This idea that sometimes things don't go according to plan and they're frustrating in the moment, but it's because it's preventing you from meeting some other misfortune that would have been far worse than the inconvenience of burnt toast.
And is that what you're saying your day has been so far?
I'm hoping, I can't prove it,
Okay.
but I'm assuming that all these wrong way, different turn things, traffic, it's because I avoided something terrible.
You know what? So I've never heard that, but I like that way more than what goes through my head all the time when it's you like back out of your driveway and you get down to the end of the street. You're like, oh man, I forgot my wallet. You turn around and go back. I always get scared. Like the thought goes to my head of like, oh shit, what if I get into an accident now? And had I not forgotten my wallet, I would have just breezed through the intersection. But instead now all right, I should probably try to adjust my mindset to a more positive way of thinking about that.
There was that airplane that had the door blow
yeah.
off, and there was supposed to be someone seated there, and I think they'd missed their flight. There was some kind of issue. That's like burnt toast in real time.
Seth MacFarlane, Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy. He was actually supposed to be on, I believe, American 11 on September 11th, 2001, and his assistant wrote his flight time down like 30 minutes off. They relayed it to him incorrectly. And so he showed up to the airport late. And he tells a story about he was sitting in the lounge waiting for his next flight that he got rebooked on, annoyed that he missed his flight. And then he starts seeing everything go down. And he heard, after a couple hours or whatever, which flights it was. And that he told the guy next to him, like, I'm sitting here right now because I missed that flight. And it's just pretty wild.
That's a crazy example. So anyways, anytime you need to run in and grab your keys, wallet.
Yes.
Don't sweat it. It's for the best.
Honestly, as you were sitting there telling me that, I was like, is there something wrong with me? Because I go the opposite direction on those
Yeah,
thoughts.
I know. It's like there's an optimism question here.
Right. Megan, we got a good show today. I'm excited. We're going to talk a little bit about Gabe Landeskog. We got a little bit of what I'm going to call an unexpected update today at practice. I know the people of Twitter are maybe a little bit less bullish on it than me.
They're hard to impress.
But I want to play it because truthfully, Megan, for me, it was the tone, the inflection, and the way Jared talked about it felt different to me than what we've seen in the past. It almost came off a little like, I don't want to jinx it because it's going really well. So we're going to play that clip. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then you sat down this morning with Sheng Peng, San Jose Hockey Now, lead beat reporter, editor-in-chief, fantastic at what they do. And you had a great, almost 30-minute conversation with them just about the deal from both sides that went down earlier this week. Mackenzie Blackwood, Alexander Georgiev, obviously Nikolai Kovalenko, part of that as well. But I thought you got a lot of great insight from Sheng on what the Avs were getting in Blackwood, his fit, what he was like as a locker room guy, and then also just what they are expecting from Georgiev and Nikolai Kovalenko. And then we also talked to Jared today about the goaltending and not just the guys that have come in, but also the guys that went out and just what the differences are. So this will be, if you're a goalie person, We got a goalie heavy episode for you.
I agree. And I think it'll be appealing to everyone who's interested in what's going on with the Avs right now, because it's a huge part of the story.
Sorry, go ahead.
Both starting goaltenders
Yes.
traded before Christmas. First time ever in NHL history. It's a pretty huge change.
I mean, and we talked about it on here, but I went on a daily face-off earlier this week, and I just made the comment, Megan, like that took a big set for Chris McFarland to go out and say, not working, making a change. Not just we're tweaking things. You and I used the phrase a couple times, breathing room, when they made the Scott Wedgwood deal, saying, that gave him a little bit of runway here to make a decision. Chris McFarland, he's like, I don't need much more runway. Give me another quarter mile and I'm going to get this taken care of. And that takes some guts to go out and do as an NHL GM.
And it's hard to do. Teams don't want to part ways with starting caliber goaltenders very easily.
No, not at all. But let's start with Gabe. Let's start with the non-goalies. Let's start with the update we got from Gabe Landeskog this morning from Jared Bednar.
We haven't seen Gabe on the ice for a while. Is there, I don't want to necessarily use the word setback, but I know we didn't have a timeline with him. Is he doing some off ice? Is he being real evaluated?
He's actually doing really well right now. So I'm not going to share all the information on what he's doing. I don't have an update. But things are going pretty good for him right now. That's all I can say.
Blackwood wrong in my tweet.
You spelled Blackwood wrong in your tweet.
I dropped the K somehow.
It still works phonetically. Megan, there was some laughter to Jared's voice there. He had a smile on his face the whole time. And he said, he's actually doing really well, but I'm not going to share with you everything he's doing. That, to me, alludes to he's making more progress than we are all being made aware of. How do you read that?
I think it's something I've heard in the past in Gabe ramping back to return to play. In the past, there is a lot of pressure doing it in the public view. And so I think that he has access to ice outside of hours. Anybody would be able to watch him. I don't know if that's true right now. Like, I don't have confirmation of that specifically, but it wouldn't surprise me then if there is on ice work that's happening and it's just not in front of anyone's line of vision.
And I think you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. I agree with you. And I really want to know where they're skating him, because I do just think, especially if it's here in Colorado, I just feel like it'd be really hard for him to be getting on the ice somewhere without somebody noticing.
I think it's like midnight skates kind of thing,
so?
Gets the keys from the rink manager type of deal.
Or maybe even like 5 a.m., like something.
Some kind of crazy hours.
Yeah. Because, like, we saw in the Amazon series that when he was up in Toronto last year, like he was skating at like a small, like, JUCO half the time. I guess they don't call them colleges up there. A small university up in Canada. And like, yeah, I feel like he's got to be finding ice at some cave somewhere for, especially if he is still here in Colorado. Like, it would just be really hard for him to go out and not have somebody pull out a phone or, snap a picture, tweet something that, hey, Gabe Landeskog's out here on the ice. I will say, and I'm going to see if I can go find the video. Last time we saw him on the ice at Family Sports, again, people were not impressed. He looked to me like he was pushing the complexity of what he was doing more so than we had ever seen him. We had seen him very straight lines, stopping, starting, wide sweeping turns. He was like reactionary on the ice when we saw him last, around the net, bouncing the puck off the boards and catching it to himself. And he looked more comfortable than we had seen him before. Nowhere near pushing it 100%. I'm not saying he looked ready to jump back in the lineup, but I thought his movements looked more natural the last time we saw him.
Yeah, I think everything we've heard, especially following the news of what was described as a minor setback, like Jared Bednar was even reluctant to describe it as a setback. You could tell he wanted to use a different word.
Mm-hmm.
has seemed to trend in the right direction, but the updates are hard to come by just because you can tell it's hard to ask a question when there hasn't been progress, but it's great then that Colleen threw that in today. Maybe not even expecting an update, but it's true. We haven't seen him in front of our own eyes in a little bit now. So I think it's good to see that behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on than we're aware of, and it all sounds very positive.
And that's the only reason I wanted to bring it up, was just I wasn't expecting any type of comment on Gabe at all. And when Colleen asked, I was just expecting a still don't have a timeline.
Yeah.
He's working. So the fact that we got Jared to say like he's actually doing really well right now, I just thought it was worth us at least mentioning here off the top.
Definitely.
Any other thoughts from what Jared said about Gabe, the way he said it, anything like that?
No.
Perfect. Let's move on. We're going to talk to we're going to hear from Sheng Peng here in just a minute. I just want, from your perspective quickly, Megan, before we get into this interview, I thought there were some really interesting takeaways from what he said. And the one thing that I'll talk about, I'm just going to tell people, pay attention to the way that he listen to the way that he talks about Mackenzie Blackwood's time in San Jose and how he was in the locker room, what his teammates thought of him. Because that was one thing I was really curious on. Because I know in New Jersey, there was just some reports that, again, not that he was like a bad guy, but just not that he was the super outgoing, loved by everyone. Again, he was just very neutral from all accounts. Doesn't really sound like it was the case in San Jose. So that was one thing that I thought interesting. Anything that really stood out to you from Sheng that you just want to put people on notice, make sure to listen to this. Almost about 30-minute interview here.
I would key in on the discussion around Alexander Georgiev, in part because we're going to talk a lot about goalies to wrap up the show. But I think his perspective is interesting because we see things from inside an Avs bubble. He's an outsider to the Avs bubble, but there are realities around what the rest of the league was even seeing based on what was going on in Colorado. And so there's a perception too that I think is shared a little bit, and then maybe some differences in a little bit of ways. So I think the whole Georgiev conversation is worth keying in on, in particular, Georgiev's perspective.
Yeah. You did plug it here in the interview, but Sheng Peng did sit down one-on-one with Alexander Georgiev. So we encourage you guys to go read Sheng's article. This is my first time getting to chat with Sheng. I was on for the interview, just kind of listen to the background, but Megan was the one who pulled it all together and asked all the great questions. Unbelievably impressed with his depth of knowledge and just his connections to the team and how dialed in he is.
He's been covering him for years, and so no one's more plugged in than him. Boots on the ground when the trade happened and unfolded. So such a great perspective, super plugged into the team. And I've met him at past rookie face-off tournaments through the prospect angle. So that's sort of how I came to know him. Very knowledgeable also of the prospects in San Jose, but just the whole of the team.
Anything else before we get into this interview?
No, let's hear it.
Sweet, let's hear it. This is Megan Angley and our very own Megan Angley and Sheng Peng of San Jose Hockey Now.
Sheng, thank you so much for joining me. Today we have Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief at San Jose Hockey Now. He has been covering the Sharks for a very long time, and we are so looking forward to getting some of your insight on the heels of what was a huge trade this Monday. The Avs acquired Mackenzie Blackwood and Giovanni Smith and a fifth-round pick in the 2027 draft from the Sharks in exchange for Alexander Georgiev, Nikolai Kovalenko, a 2025 fifth, and a 2026 second-round pick. First and foremost, how are you doing today, Sheng?
I'm okay. Tail end of a road trip. I'm headed back today, so I'm going to be happy to be in my own bed for the first time in 2 weeks.
Your tweets were some of the first I saw of anyone confirming that this trade was going down. Can you tell me what it was like on your end as this all unfolded?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good story. So the Sharks practiced in Florida on Monday. They stayed over. They had played on Saturday, and they stayed over a couple more days because they weren't playing the Hurricanes until Tuesday. So anyway, they practiced on Monday in Florida. Mackenzie Blackwood was on the ice. Everything looked normal. The Sharks were kind of sputtering a little bit because they had just had a 3-1 loss to the Florida Panthers. Blackwood had 51 saves in that game, and then the game before Tampa Bay Lightning, they had lost 8-1, so they were sputtering a little bit, but trying to keep good spirits up. It was a hard practice for an hour. Actually, after the practice, was supposed to talk with Ryan Warsofsky, was supposed to talk to Macklin Celebrini, and anyway, about after waiting for 30 minutes or so, they told me, hey, actually, you got to wait. There's something happening. And so I assume that's when everything that's when they told Blackwood right after he got off the ice. And instead of getting Warsofsky or Celebrini, Mike Greer emerges from the hallway and he announces the trade. And so for me, it's a little bit of a right time, right place, right there for that one. I guess that's why you go on the road for things like that. But that's how it just all came together, or at least that's how it all kind of concluded in a very, very abrupt fashion. When they were practicing, there was no obvious sign that Mackenzie Blackwood was getting traded. He was on the ice. I did notice Mike Greer was on the phone a lot. I had wanted to go up to him and ask him what he thought of the Dolphins game the day before, because his brother is the GM of the Dolphins, but he was on the phone a lot. So maybe that was a telltale sign that something was going on. And from what I understand, the players were all on the bus actually, and they didn't know what was happening. The Sharks players, they were all on the bus ready to get to the airport to go to Raleigh. And eventually Warsofsky told the leadership group, the captains, and then they told the players, and Blackwood was waiting outside of the bus, and one by one, I guess, according to Warsofsky, they all went off the bus to give him a hug. And it tells you a little bit about what they think of Mackenzie Blackwood. So actually, it was a really, really tough day for the Sharks, but a really interesting day, I guess, on the journalistic side.
I want to talk about both sides of the return on Colorado's end, San Jose's end, but you mentioned that this was a little bit of a tough day in the Sharks losing Blackwood. He had a .911 save percentage while facing some of the highest shot volumes in the league. What kind of impact did he have on San Jose this season?
I think there's both on and off the ice thing. Actually, if you remember last year, Mackenzie Blackwood's very first game for the Sharks, he made 51 saves against the Avalanche, 51 saves in a 2-1 shootout loss. And then against the Panthers, his last game as a Shark, he made 51 saves in a 3-1 loss there. And that's the kind of impact that he could have on certain nights for this team that was rebuilding, that was struggling a lot defensively, that he would keep them in games that they had no business being in. And off the ice, he just was a very, very beloved figure. He just was always positive in the worst of times. The Sharks have only won 29 of the 112 games that Blackwood was on the team. And that sounds like an indictment on Blackwood, but it wasn't. I mean, you know the roster. Everybody knows the roster. That's not an indictment on Blackwood. It's a minor miracle that they have those 29 wins, actually. And a lot of them were because of Blackwood. But anyway, off the ice, he was relentlessly positive. He was as far as I can tell, very, very beloved. Everybody was his friend. I think Mero Ferraro put it best. Mero Ferraro said something like, he's a really good friend of mine. Actually, he's good friends with just about everybody on the team. And so he's a very, very kind of positive figure in that sense. And so that's the impact. He became, in just a year and a couple of months, one of the more popular Sharks, I would say, too.
And as far as his goaltending growth from last season through now, where did you see the biggest area of improvement?
I think it's more, I wouldn't say it's a growth from last year, because last year he was very, very good for even a worse Sharks team. So I would say that the growth is more from his time in New Jersey, which didn't end well. And a lot of it is just health. He had a lot of soft tissue injuries in New Jersey. And he's talked a lot about doing Pilates and doing things like that to kind of stretch out. And you've seen him. Mackenzie doesn't look like a typical goalie. He's bigger than most of his defensemen. And so I heard a couple of summers ago when the Sharks acquired him that maybe he was a little too big and he wasn't as sort of limber and flexible as you like a goalie to be. And he worked on that. He was working on that summer when the Sharks traded for him. And so you can see the results on the ice just in terms of his health. And so in terms of just his growth as a goalie, I think a lot of it was just he just had to be healthy. And he's been pretty healthy since he's been with the Sharks.
Did this trade surprise you at all? I know Blackwood was a name Avs fans were talking about a lot this year. Was there murmurs on your end of a potential move leading up to this?
Not at this early a stage. Obviously, Elliot Friedman had put out a couple times that the Avs were interested, and obviously we could see that Georgiev was struggling a little bit, even though it seemed like he was playing a little better, but that there were some struggles on his end. But for it to happen this early, and Mike Riss said it himself that he would have preferred not to have made this trade so early. He didn't think that he would make this trade so early. This is kind of a move that usually happens more around the trade deadline or much closer to. But the Avalanche, they paid up, and not just a second round pick, but Nikolai Kovalenko.
I was thinking about that too. At first, I think Avs were so ready to get out of dire straits in the goaltending situation that it feels like a great deal. But obviously, a lot of assets move out, Kovalenko being one of the bigger ones. I guess I wondered if the Kakkonen deadline trade of last year was maybe or of the past was a cautionary tale for Greer of when to accept the best possible return and why that might have made this a smart move from his perspective.
Yeah, that could have been the case. I think with goaltending, as we've noticed, goaltending stocks can just go up and down. Like if I told you 2 years ago you're trading Georgiev for Blackwood, you would have laughed in my face because Georgiev was really good 2 years ago. Even last year when Georgiev was not as good, but still probably average, still probably not a deal that you would make last year. And so goaltending stocks can just move up and down unless you're one of those elite guys, you're Hellebuck, you're Shesterkin. So people will trust you even if you're struggling a little bit, Saros, guys like that, right? But guys like Blackwood and Georgiev, they're very talented, but they're more maybe in the middle class if we're being honest, at least until they've proven themselves to be elite goalies. And so those kind of stocks can go up and down. Last year, Kakkonen was doing very well for the Sharks in the first couple of months. And Sharks fans were talking about, we're going to get a third-round pick, going to get this or that for him. And by the deadline, he got a seventh-round pick, and he got a Vitek Vanacek, who was injured. Vitek Vanacek didn't even play for the Sharks last year. So goaltending stocks can do that. If Blackwood had a couple bad weeks, a bad month, which can easily happen on a team like this, on the Sharks team like this, that, yeah, he would have not had a lot of value to anybody out there. So, again, to get a second-round pick and a guy that the Sharks at least project as a middle six forward on a playoff team in Kovalenko, when I know that he's already 25, but he's still a rookie. So once he refines his game a little bit, that is an incredible value for a guy that you like a lot, but he's a goaltender, and goalies are, of course, they're voodoo. You never know. And so Georgiev can come to the Sharks right now and light it up. I don't think it would surprise anybody because he's played a lot of good goal in the last 3-4 years of his career. So it's just something like this. Yeah, it's the way Mike Greer put it. It was an offer that he couldn't refuse. And I don't know if I would be that strong. I wouldn't say that, but I thought that it was a very, very good offer. And sure, Blackwood could be amazing up to the deadline, and maybe you can turn that second to a first, but that's really, really unlikely. There's a more likely chance that Blackwood struggles a little bit and you get less at the deadline. So that's the way it goes with goalies.
That makes a lot of sense. And I want to put a bow on the Colorado side of things. So, one, are there any wholesome Mackenzie Blackwood stories that fans should know about? It sounds like his vibes are very high.
Yes, his vibes for 60 are very high. Not all of it is wholesome, but the wholesome stuff I can say, though, one thing that I reported on in my story, and I actually asked Mackenzie because this was like this was a locker room conversation that he wasn't being recorded, and so I asked him if it was okay, but so of course the Sharks acquired Yaroslav Askarov at the last summer, top goaltending prospect. Blackwood's not stupid. He knows that Askarov is being tabbed to be the Sharks starter. In fact, Askarov has a longer contract than both Blackwood and Vanacek. After the Sharks signed Askarov to a 2-year contract extension over the summer, whereas Vanacek and Blackwood are both UFAs. So that tells you a little bit about where one guy is going to be, where the team thinks one guy is, and where the team is kind of not as sure about Blackwood and Vanacek because they're both UFAs. And so anyway, so Blackwood could have taken Askarov as a threat, and that would have been understandable. because Blackwood could have been like, well, I was so good for you guys last year, and you're not even going to give me a chance. You're just going to basically anoint a 22-year-old to be the starter. So they had to call off Askarov early in the season, and Askarov won his first game as a Shark, and he also got an assist in the game too. So his first assist or point of, I think, his NHL career there. And walking into the locker room post game, the first thing we hear when we walk in is we hear Blackwood talking to Askarov, and Blackwood's like, "You're like Bobby Orr out there," and because Askarov also is known for his aggressive puck handling. And maybe too aggressive sometimes. And so anyway, to hear that from Blackwood right after the game, this is the kind of performance that if you're Blackwood, you kind of see like, wow, you can kind of see the future there, because Askarov was really good in that victory against, I think it was LA late November. So that attitude was a very, very Mackenzie Blackwood attitude. There's actually there's so many stories. One of my favorite recent ones is just an off-the-cuff conversation with him, and we're talking about how good-looking Alex Wenberg is. And Blackwood's like, he is so good-looking, right, Sheng, right? And then Blackwood quipped that if the Sharks had a calendar, that Wenberg would be the face of it every single month. And it would just be a competition for who would get to be every month. There would be a different Shark with Wenberg on the calendar, like to be like Wenberg's like mascot or his pet or something like that. So the competition would be who would get to be on each month with Wenberg. And so that's the kind of stuff that that he's always win, lose, or whatever. Obviously post game, Sharks lost a lot of games, so he's not going to be in a great mood for that. But you catch him in a practice, win, lose, whatever happened the night before, he's going to come in with a positive attitude. He's going to work hard. Nico Sturm put it well too, that he's a guy that knows when to keep it loose, knows when to work hard. And so you can see that.
I love to hear that. I'm looking forward to getting to know him more in the Avs locker room. And moving over to the San Jose side, I want to start with Nikolai Kovalenko. What do you think the Sharks' impression of Kovalenko and the caliber of player that they've received in this trade is?
Well, we saw a little bit of it last night against St. Louis when he had 3 assists, but it's exactly what Mike Greer said, that he's very competitive. He's running the forecheck. Even though he is a smaller player, he doesn't play like that. He gets inside. He's strong. And so he had 3 assists. I think 2 of them were directly off his own forechecks. And so that's the kind of guy that's going to be he's shaping up to be a good complementary piece for a middle six Sharks line. And so, I think that the Sharks said it, and you could see it last night, that's what he's shaping up to be. And also too, from what I hear from people, talking with people outside of the Sharks, outside of the Avs, that he's the kind of guy, he's competitive, that rubs off, that's inspiring. He seems like a really good kid. And so those are the kind of things that Sharks are looking for too, besides the play on the ice, but just a good character guy, a good guy to that can grow maybe with a Macklin Celebrini and a Will Smith and so on.
And you used the words middle six, but seeing him in a top line opportunity with Celebrini and Toffoli, he obviously complemented them pretty well. At least the early results are pretty positive. Do you think that's more an evaluation period for him, or could he flex up in the lineup in a top 6 role a little bit too?
Well, he could, yeah. I don't want to put a silly on him, but I will say though that on a line like that, right? Like, he's a complimentary guy. He's the 3rd best player on that line. And so there's nothing wrong with that. If you can be the 3rd best player on a first line and be a regular at that, then you're going to have a good career. And obviously he, kind of fits the kind of the traditional kind of model of a line, right? You have the scorer, the shooter in Toffoli, you have the playmaker in Celebrini, you have the digger, the grinder in Kovalenko. And so if he can do that on a regular basis, I'm not expecting him to put up 3 assists a game. But yeah, so certainly, yeah, I wouldn't put it past him. He's certainly very skilled. It wasn't just winning those pucks on the forecheck, but he made that next pass. He made that next play that he needed to make. He got it into the hands of the skill guys. And so if he can do that, then yeah, he can have a long career as a complimentary guy on maybe even a first line for sure.
That's awesome. Now for the Georgiev of it all. For people listening, you should check out Sheng Peng's article on San Jose Hockey Now, you have an exclusive with Georgiev up there talking a little bit about his initial reactions to the trade. And I thought there were a lot of interesting insights in this article. I think the things that stick out are an overall positive feeling on his personal game, that he felt like it was trending in the right direction during the season. He recognized that it didn't start out so good, but he liked his last 10 games or so. I guess I wanted to hear your impression of that interview when it happened in person.
Well, I think that he clearly didn't want to talk too much about Colorado, which is a very typical thing when guys get traded, and they get traded from difficult circumstances, be it Georgiev in Colorado, or Gaudreau, the Rangers, which wasn't a trade but waiver claim that Gaudreau didn't necessarily want, or Askarov, Nashville. There's a lot of kind of smoke in his exit. So Wallman, Detroit, a little bit too. So yeah, so guys don't want to talk about it. So that was not normal. But I do think that he is happy for the opportunity. I think definitely that it was tough on him in Colorado. And I don't know this for a fact, but I mean, I can see if a guy thinks that, I don't know, this is just me speculating. So I want to be clear. This is not even the impression that I got from the interview, but if you feel like too much of the blame, the weight is being put on you, that it's nice to have a fresh start. But again, that's my speculation. But talking with Alexander that day, yeah, I think he was happy to be in San Jose for sure, though.
And what has been the reception of Georgiev, kind of around the room, within the fan base?
Well, I think it is definitely tough to replace a guy that was as popular, as beloved as Blackwood was. But I guess though, what makes it a little easier is that Blackwood had only been here for a year and a couple of months. So it's not like he is a guy who's been here for 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And so reception seems good. I think the Sharks recognize that this is a business, and so yeah. I think the fan base is cautious. Obviously, they've heard Georgiev's unpleasant nicknames, and they've seen the season that he's had, which is not the season overall that I'm sure that he will want either. But so I think there is a lot of caution, a lot of worry, because Blackwood was so good for not a great team and kept the Sharks in a lot of games. But I think though that with Georgiev's track record, and that's what I always tell people. Same thing with, I mean, Blackwood was in the same place when the Sharks traded him, that nobody wanted him. The Sharks acquired Blackwood for just a 6th-round pick. But Blackwood had a track record. He had good seasons. He had clear talent. And so you never know what's going to happen. And so same thing with Georgiev. So I would say that the players have embraced him. The fans are very, very cautious, but you don't know with goaltending. I don't think it would shock anybody if Georgiev was better than Blackwood for the rest of the season, because that's just the way goaltending works. Georgiev was better than Blackwood for most of his career, right? But then right now at this moment, Georgiev is sort of the throwaway, and Blackwood is sort of the shining piece of everything. But that's the way things work, high, low, and can change at a drop of a dime.
And you kind of make mention of the acknowledgement and awareness of some of the struggles Georgiev has had this season. How do you think the Sharks view him in the goaltending picture moving forward, especially knowing Askarov is in the pipeline?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We know that Mike Grier really liked Blackwood. You can tell in Mike Grier's interview that it was very emotional. Actually, Mike compared trading Blackwood to trading Thomas Hertl last year, which for Grier it makes sense because Grier has only been Sharks GM for a couple of years. But for Sharks fans, though, who have known Thomas Hertl for a decade, that's a pretty heavy thing to say. But of course, Mike had Mackenzie back in New Jersey when Mike was assistant coach for the Devils. So he's known Blackwood for quite a while. So we know, and Mike confirmed that he was considering leaving Blackwood and Askarov together if they could come to a contract, but just that Blackwood was probably going to make more money than the Sharks would want to pay there when Blackwood hit free agency. With Georgiev, there's not as strong a sense of how much Mike likes him, though Mike also did have him with the Rangers when Mike was a advisor for Chris Drury there right before the Sharks hired him. So Mike does have some familiarity with them. So I think it's very, very open. I think with Georgiev and Vanacek there now, they're in the same situation. They're both going to be UFAs, and so we'll see how well they perform. One thing that Georgiev did mention that I asked him was he says he doesn't know Askarov well, but it seemed like he wanted to meet him, and I think everyone kind of knows that it's kind of Askarov's net to lose in the future, and it's going to be how well you can work with him. And Georgiev, obviously being a Russian speaker, maybe Georgiev can kind of be. Georgiev's always been the starter or the starter in waiting, like he was in New York, kind of. And so maybe it could be time for him to kind of move into a more veteran role, and he might be good in that. But it's hard to say right now, though, because we're still months away from. There's still a lot of hockey to play this season, and so we have to see how Georgiev responds. Georgiev may actually respond to a lot of shots like Blockwood did, right? So it just kind of depends. Or he may not. He may be the kind of guy that he's not going to like facing 35, 40 shots a night. Which, so we'll see how he deals with it. So. But I think it's a pot. I mean, they do need if Askarov comes in next year, as I think is the plan, you're going to need somebody to play with him, and you don't not necessarily going to give Askarov 60 games next year as a rookie. So you're going to want somebody that has starter experience that can maybe be a 1B. And Georgiev is certainly capable and talented to do that. He did that in New York. He was a 1B there, right? And so wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy that the Sharks kind of picked there.
And just looking at an overview of the trade, it felt like for Colorado, this injected new life into the team, just a fresh start in a lot of ways. Have you seen a similar rejuvenation on the Sharks side? Like, does this feel a little bit like a turning point for this team?
I wouldn't say that yet. Mackenzie was very, very beloved in the locker room. Like Nico Sturm said, it was a somber, sad day in the room that day, but they also all understand it's a business. And so obviously, and they had a very nice game against St. Louis last night, so they're not carrying it on the ice. And so I wouldn't say that it has done that yet for the Sharks. I think it's still a little bit of wait and see. How does Georgiev play? How does he fit into the room? How does he handle just being in a much different situation, right? Where Colorado, he may be facing 20 shots a night, and in San Jose, obviously, it could be double that. So I think it's a little bit of a wait and see overall in the Sharks room.
That makes a lot of sense. And you've been so generous with your time. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you, Sheng.
Thank you, Megan. I'll talk to you.
There we go. Great job, Megan. That was an outstanding interview.
Thank you.
Had a lot of people in the chat saying, great questions. Oh my gosh, another great question from Megan.
You know what it was specifically was, what's a wholesome Mackenzie Blackwood story? People are like, what the people want. Vibes.
We're going to get into all of the goaltending stuff. We're going to break down more there. We're going to pair it with what we've heard from Jared Bednar. But I am going to stop us real quick just to talk about Nikolai Kovalenko, because a lot of what I think we're going to spend some breath on here is the goaltending and how the guys coming into Colorado tied in with the guys going out. It's all kind of connected. Nikolai Kovalenko pops off for 3 points last night. I made the comment to you on the show last week that he was probably the one player, or earlier this week, that he was probably the one player that didn't feel like he was landing in a better spot for him. I feel like he was landing in a better spot for him. He's going to get a great look there. He's going to get to play big minutes alongside some very talented players. And I think it makes a lot of sense that Nikolai Kovalenko was part of that deal for the Sharks.
You know, it put into perspective when Jared Bednar talked about the expectation of more guys returning to the lineup at some point, right? Like not in the immediate, necessarily diminishing Kovalenko's role in Colorado, and how he had played different roles already throughout the course of this year for the Avs. And Jared Bednar pointed to mixed results. And I think that in a more depth role, Kovalenko was trying to rediscover his stride. It seemed like at the start of the year, playing up in the lineup really suited him well and helped to get some points strung together. And I think he was still finding that being utilized lower in the lineup. And I don't necessarily view that as a negative on him. I think he was being straddled with more inexperienced players, and he's inexperienced himself.
Right.
And so that's where I'm on your side and Jared Bednar's side with this now, that there is more opportunity for him in San Jose. And in our trade show, I talked about, I love what San Jose is doing with its young players right now, just sort of giving them free reign to discover how they want to be NHL players with Smith and Celebrini. And I think it's fun to see then Kovalenko play on a top line and utilize his hard work ethic to help translate to some goal scoring, playing with such talented players like Macklin Celebrini. And I'm getting carried away, but I want to see that help even drive the Calder bid for Celebrini, having a workhorse like that on his line. Maybe not long term. That could be a crazy thing.
But I mean, Megan, like they've got reps together last night, and like those goals that Kovalenko contributed on 3 assists, like those were hard work below the goal line, digging pucks out, finding guys out front. I could actually see why, if they wanted to keep him, maybe not every shift, but make sure that he's getting touches out there with Celebrini on the ice.
And you know why? I feel that the conversation around Kovalenko has kind of pigeonholed him in the middle six, and that is not even pointed at Sheng Peng. That's
pointed at Evan Rowell.
No, I think Evan Rowell would probably actually speak to his second line upside. I think that's more so where his ceiling is in the future one day.
Yeah.
And the reason I get a little defensive of Kovalenko is because I think there was a higher skill ceiling than people gave him credit for, because he is such a hard worker. I think people see that type of player. It's like an Arturi Lehkonen light. Both kind of smaller players, but there is a little more finish and puck skill in those hands for Kovalenko than I think he's been given credit for, that I hope San Jose will utilize and lean into as appropriate.
And then the one thing that I will just say to cap this off, then we can get on to hearing from Jared. I agree with everything you just said. And I do think that it speaks to what we've seen out of Ivan this year, that everything you just said, because I'm sure that the Avs recognize everything that you just laid out. And Ivan made this possible.
What, 22 years old?
Mm-hmm.
And very limited pro experience. He came from major junior, so not even like Kovalenko having played in a men's pro league before this. Ivan's ascension to the NHL, I've been saying it all along. I'm just kidding. I didn't think he was going to be a full-time NHLer this season, but you go back to rookie face-off, not just this past summer, but the one before it. He stood out in a big way. He separated from his peers among some of the best prospects in the league at the time. I'm excited for what he's done, and I think you're right. He made Kovalenko expendable.
Let's hear from Jared Bednar today, or let's get on to this topic that we talked about with Jared Bednar today. I guess I should say that. I do want to remind you guys about our great partners down at Landmark Lincoln and the all-new 2024 Lincoln Corsair GT plug-in hybrid. Head on over to landmarklincoln.com to check out the latest offers and incentives, including the incredible tax incentives on the all-new Corsair GT plug-in hybrids. Go to landmarklincoln.com or stop into the #1 Lincoln dealer in Colorado to see if you qualify for no payments for up to 90 days, Megan. I could do a lot with no car payment for 90 days. Again, that's landmarklincoln.com or stop in at the corner of Broadway and Bellevue today to see why they've been Colorado's trusted Lincoln dealer since 1911. Also want to tell you guys about our newest partner up at 7 Brew Coffee, but don't just let me tell you, but from yesterday. Hey everybody, Jesse Montagna, Guerrilla Sports out here paying a visit to our great friends up at 7 Brew in their newest location here in Firestone, Colorado, right at I-25 and Highway 119. And it's an absolute vibe up here. This is not your standard coffee experience. Drive through, walk up, delicious coffee drinks. You guys know me. I'm not a huge coffee drinker. There was like 3 different things. And I was like, can I get some more of that? Delicious energy drinks. Come and check them out. Just opening. And it's going to be packed up here. This is the future of coffee. I can tell you guys that right now. Ton of fun. I-25, Highway 119. Come check out 7 Brew, their newest location here in Colorado. How did I do that? Whoa. No, but we did. We stopped up at 7 Brew yesterday. Blake and I did. Got to try a few different things. The Blondie, Blake had 2 of. Probably, I don't know how great that was for his heart, but he had 2 of them because he enjoyed them that much. Tried the cinnamon roll, then we each tried an energy drink. They were all delicious. It's friends and family weekend. So if you're heading up, maybe if you're heading up to see the Eagles this weekend, check out the 7 Brew website. They've got some limited hours so you can get in maybe ahead of the rush. The grand opening is on Monday, and it's going to be nuts. And then actually, Megan, you and I will be up there next Saturday doing a live show from 7 Brew before we head over to the Eagles game ourselves. It's going to be swag day. They're going to be giving away all kinds of stuff, t-shirts, hats, free drinks, all kinds. I mean, they're giving away all kinds of stuff. So more details coming on that this week. But if you guys want to head on up, check out some of the newest, also great area that they're in. There's all kinds of new stuff popping up. Yes, Vaguely Sober, cinnamon roll. That's what it's called. That's what the drink is. I don't even fully know what goes all into it, but it tasted like a cinnamon roll. And I was just gulping it down. So it's delicious. But come check us out if you guys, or come check them out. And if you guys want to come see us, we'll be up there next week doing a live show.
We already had a few people reach out in that area. So if you're listening, definitely come say hi. I didn't confirm on Twitter because I didn't know.
Yes.
But definitely come say hi.
Yes. No, we were up there yesterday figuring out where we're going to get everything set up. And it was very important to Blake that we got set up somewhere that people could come over and chat and hang out and things like that. So should be fun. More details coming on that this week. Okay. Let's hear from Jared Bednar from this morning. This is a couple different parts of the interview. We had to splice a little bit of it together, getting just all on the same topic. It's talking about the goaltenders, and it's just all really interesting. There's a theme to what Jared Bednar is talking about here, but let's hear from it.
The goaltending, we were talking a little bit about it yesterday, and you made the comment that, Scott in particular has been managing the game really well, kind of being able to settle things down and just be a steady presence. Is that maybe what was missing with the previous tandem, that game management, and the highs were really high, the lows were really low, and it just felt like that roller coaster was nonstop?
Yeah, I mean, I think the game management, it means more than what people think, Like I said, it's not just about making saves and goals saved above expected. I think there's veteran guys, the good ones, have a tendency to be able to help control the game in your favor. And I think Scott's really good at it. I don't know about Blackwood as much. I know what he's like and what he's capable of as a goaltender, stopping the puck. I'm not sure about the game management part of it, but that was a big difference that I noticed when Scott came in as opposed to a younger, more, and that's experience too, and it's, veteran savvy, and it's hockey IQ and sort of understanding the game and really being in tune with it. And I'm sure there's, like every player has a strength and weaknesses. I'm sure goaltenders are the same way, but I noticed it right away when Scott comes in. It just seems like the game's more controlled in our favor than with the previous two guys.
You mentioned that, like veteran experience or lack of experience. Do you feel like it's a trend maybe in the league where younger goaltenders or newer goaltenders don't freeze the puck necessarily as much, or they're playing it, they're making the save, they're playing it out, they're just not doing that game control aspect, like stopping it?
Well, I think it's taught. It's something you learn. I think it's the evolution of your game over time. I think goaltenders in general take more time and more runway to sort of hit their prime, like we've always kind of known that. So I don't know, I haven't studied all the young goaltenders. Again, I think individuals will have different strengths and weaknesses. So I'm sure there's some young guys that manage the game really well, and I'm sure there's some veteran guys that don't, So, but it's one thing that not only I notice, but the rest of our staff, I think players, just slowing the game down, keeping it in control so things don't get too chaotic, even if you don't have your legs or aren't playing great defensively, that seems to be a strength of Wedge's.
Kind of back to that juice conversation from yesterday and before, and what you were saying about the goalies earlier. Is that part of the appeal of bringing in a guy like Wedgwood and potentially Blackwood, that they feel confident enough in their game and their ability to take charge of their position and tie that back to game management?
Yes. Yeah, I think, it's like we have some really good players on our team that are super quiet, right? And our goaltenders are both really quiet, and that's just who they are. I'm not asking guys to I certainly want guys to work out of their comfort zone and have an influence on our room, our team, everybody. But some guys are just naturally, that's their personality. I just personally feel that our team needs a little pizzazz because we have lots of quiet guys and lots of them are really good players. But you add Ross Colton back in, you can see the difference he makes. You add, and then Manson too. Like, we're missing some guys that are veteran guys that are real comfortable in their skin. They're going to say what they need to say in the locker room. They're, and just the overall sort of energy in our room can, like, when you take out guys like that, you can notice that it's quieter. It's just, I hate to say it is what it is, but you add Keaton Middleton in there. He's a big guy, happy-go-lucky guy. He's a lot of fun in the room. Like, I think that helps, Like when the energy's up, you tend to go and play with more energy as well. Doesn't mean we're not a big raw team. We don't need big celebrations and music pumping before the game to be ready. Never been that way. We weren't that way leading up to 22. We weren't that way in 2022. But I do think there's some fire and some juice around the room that gets added when you bring in, like big personalities, and it helps.
So with that, we noticed it was the New Jersey game where Scott got the shutout. Banging his stick on the ice as guys are kind of huddling around him there at the end. Is that what it translates?
However they do it, whatever their personality is. Again, I don't think he's doing anything for a show. I just think that's who he is and the energy that he brings, and I think that energy can be contagious.
All right. Now that we've got that, and we've got everything that we heard from Sheng, let's unpack all of this a little bit, Megan. I think Jared's been pretty open and honest these last couple of days about the old tandem, as he referred to him there. And he made sure to call out, like, look, it's not that these are bad guys, but they were quiet guys to themselves, not overly vocal. And I do think it's significant, given who we started this podcast off by talking about. Gabe Landeskog, Eric Johnson. You've lost some of that vocal leadership. Because as he said, to me, Nathan MacKinnon is a do as I do, not a do as I say. He's a lead by example kind of guy. Cale Makar, we're not in the locker room, in between periods and stuff like that. So we don't hear what kind of leader Cale Makar is, but he's, again, more quiet, more reserved guy. Follow my lead, not so much, I'm going to come in and get everyone fired up. I do just think that was something that they identified as we got two goalies who are not vocal, who maybe don't quite feel like they fit in part of the room. And when you combine that with the struggling play, to bring in a guy like Scott Wedgwood that, we said right away when we met him, this guy's going to be great for the locker room. And then to add a guy like Wedgwood that, Sheng Peng used the word beloved. He was beloved in San Jose. I just can't help but think that in addition to what they thought, the Avs thought they were getting in Wedgwood and Blackwood in terms of on ice, it's clear that what was happening behind the scenes was equally as important.
I think, one, I'm very qualified to speak on this because I'm a lot like Alexander Georgiev from my view of things socially. And I benefit from having somebody in a social setting who is the golden retriever, is going to pull me out and say, hey, have you met so-and-so, and walk me around the room and help me make introductions because I am just a little bit introverted socially. And I think it's not even just leadership, but like Ross Colton, I don't know that he is issuing any sort of messaging in between periods or criticisms of their game. He is just yapping. Yeah. And so I think having somebody like that reach across the aisle and just make introductions and talking, that's the value of a Ross Colton. That's the value of a Josh Manson. And a Scott Wedgwood, though new to the room, is just so extroverted. He's going to add to the connectivity of the group. Whereas Georgiev, I don't think, or Georgiev and Annunen together, I don't think this is necessarily a negative, but they weren't adding to the unity of the room the way in which a Scott Wedgwood, as extroverted as he is going to do that.
And let me interrupt you just to give a quick example, and I apologize for cutting you off. Scott Wedgwood gets player of the game in his first game with the Avs. And as we've very well documented on this show, one of the things in his speech was to give credit, saying it took both goalies to win this game. The next win that Alexander Georgiev is in net for, Scott Wedgwood gives the hat, the big hat, the player of the game hat, immediately to Alexander Georgiev. When you said someone that'll, for you, Megan, like someone that'll take you around the room and say, hey, have you met? That was Scott Wedgwood taking Alexander Georgiev around the room and saying, hey, have you met these people you've been on the team with for 3 years?
Let's lift you up.
Right. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to point that out, that it was literally, you could tell that was one of the first things Scott Wedgwood did here was try to make Georgiev more part of the group.
Because, the leadership component's important, but I think as a shy person myself, having someone like that is so helpful in a group just to get everybody even more connected. It just opens conversation and makes it more easy and free flowing.
Jared Bednar did, again, he talked about game management, and I tried to pull out of him that, hey, the highs and lows, how hard were those to manage? And he kept bringing it back to off the ice and what were things like in the locker room. And I do wonder if that was him saying, or if that's him, if you're reading between the lines saying, yeah, look, the stuff that was going on the ice, you guys could all see, but the problems it was causing behind the scenes were adding to everything. We're making everything worse. Did you read that the same way? And in addition to that, the way that Sheng talked about his conversation with Georgie.
Absolutely, because we pinpointed a bit of a morale issue at one point where they were losing games. They weren't losing them in a very good fashion either. It was disappointing and frustrating, and you could see that on the players' faces in the locker room post-game. And I'll be careful in how I talk about it because I wasn't worried the team couldn't come out of it. I'd seen them debilitated by worse, but it was observable that the team was down. And I talked about even someone like Nathan McKinnon can be contagious and why it's important for him to try to channel his frustration into something productive. So it wasn't even single-handedly pointing at any one area of the locker room, but goaltending and Georgiev were always a part of it. I almost just said Georgiev instead of goaltending, but you know what? It's what I mean. Georgiev was a part of it because he wore his expressions on his sleeve, and I think he's the kind of goaltender who, with 24 hours to think about the game, probably takes more ownership of his role in it. But in the immediate, it seemed like he was quick to point fingers. Mm-hmm. And I think the Buffalo game is a really interesting and recent example of that. Losing his mind, losing his cool on the bench. I found it interesting in the San Jose Hockey Now article that he said, I felt like let me actually have it right here. I felt like my game was trending in the right direction. I felt like it never got into my head.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It did, and everyone saw it.
Megan, when I read that last night up in the press box, I laughed out loud when I read that quote. Because it's like, what are you talking about?
It did.
That felt like the number one issue to me was that it was in his head.
And where it's not single-handedly his fault or problem is, but obviously had an impact on the rest of the team. To hear Jared Bednar talk about the penalty kill, for example, the numbers are still not great in terms of the league standings, but the other metrics that they're using to evaluate its progression are very promising. And Jared Bednar was pretty candid in pointing out goaltending. The PK has been better when they've gotten good goaltending. And I look at the team's record now with the loss last night. There are only 3 games that they have lost by fewer than 5 goals. And let's see, how many losses are they at this season? 17?
The Avs?
Yeah, let's see.
I think it's 14.
14? I'm so sorry,
14?
Avs, for giving you more losses. 14 losses on the season. So 3 of 14 losses have all been by 5 or more goals. Did I say that right? I might have mixed around my words.
I think you mixed that up. Most of the losses have been
by more than 5 goals.
Yes.
To hear Jared Bednar talk about game management, it is important to key in on first period specifically. Just look at Wedgwood's last 4 starts. 2 of 4, no goals allowed in the first period. And similarly, only 1 goal allowed in first periods in the other 2. I think it's important to take note of how he is able to break the game up into chunks and reset and lock back in period by period and not let games get completely out of hand. I know, like Carolina game, not necessarily the greatest game. And then recently, this last night's game didn't necessarily feel good, but you look at the flukiness of those goals and you're not really pinning them on Wedgwood too harshly. I think it's the difference of the Avs still had chances to get back in that game. They just couldn't figure out goal support. And that's the difference. I think that is a partial indicator of the team playing differently in front of different goaltending. And it absolutely being a little bit morale based too.
Well, and I think it's a more than a little bit morale based, just me personally, because you have to take into account the whole of this season for the Avs and what they are battling through. The injuries, the inconsistency in the lineup, getting off to that slow start. Those first 4 games, that was goaltending. You know what I mean? Like, it was the first 4 games of the season. We hadn't really settled in a lot. That was the goaltending really struggled. So the Avs were behind the 8 ball from the start. Then you pile everything on top of that. And I just think that, you're talking about the first periods. When you have all of that going, to be constantly fishing that puck out of your net within the first handful of shots of the game. I mean, I made the comment to you yesterday, they started every game down 1-0, it felt like. Those games that they lost, that you were just reading off the stat line for how many of those losses they gave up 4, 5, 6 goals. I mean, it felt like that was how the game was starting and that the Avs never even had a chance. And I do think that had just a massive impact on the morale of the group and the belief in the group in their goaltenders.
And it's both, those are shared starts, that number between Anin and Georgiev.
Yes.
And that's where it's not even just Georgiev. It was the combination of the two not getting the job done. Even Bednar, in his partial criticisms of that aspect, have used the word tandem. And I think it's important, even looking at last night, they were well-intentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And now, knowing the context of how sick this team is right now, you see that they didn't give up on Wedgwood.
Yeah.
Even though there were those fluky goals, they threw everything but the kitchen sink at Utah, and the quality of chances wasn't always there, but the effort was. That compete, even when they're sick as dogs, I think is worth noting. They come out with a losing result, so maybe it doesn't feel easy to get optimistic around that, but my eyes directly go to the well-intentioned part of it all in trying to compete in front of Wedgwood despite not being at 100% themselves.
Well, and I just can't help but tie it back to what we saw in that Buffalo game. Second puck goes in the net on Georgiev, and he's smacking it. He's smacking it around just like that. He gets pulled. He's on the bench. He's frustrated. Apparently, there is a longer video of him really frustrated on the bench that night that I haven't seen. But observably frustrated. And then Wedgwood comes in, and I made the comment that night as we were doing the intermission and post-game shows. He's battling. He's competing to keep them down 4-0. He's competing to keep it 4-1. And then suddenly you blink, and at the end of the game, they won. And there was just a new sense of energy and a new sense of life. And it was an immediate difference from when Alexander Georgiev left that game to when Scott Wedgwood came in. And I do just think that for all parties involved, it had run its course here. The relationship had soured between Georgiev and I think the rest of the group. And I just think that it was time to move on for everybody's sake.
I think so too. It wasn't working. The pressure, the ploys to try and get the best out of Georgiev, and the timing. They needed him to be more consistent right now.
Yeah.
We can speculate that it didn't appear that he had the mental side of the game right there all season. It didn't look that way to our view. And maybe he feels differently, but the results at the end of the day is what made this decision. And that's where I feel for Annunen too. Like, I was talking to Jay last night post game that I think Annunen's, what is it, like right person, wrong time.
Yeah,
He's a great prospect. It's not the right time for him to be one. He shouldn't have needed to enter starting conversations.
Right.
He wasn't
that was
even
not the
really
plan.
supposed to be in backup conversations as soon as this year.
Yep.
So I think it's the right goaltender, the wrong time. He's going to be a better goaltender in this league than we've seen, I think. And I just don't think Colorado had the opportunity for him to realize that.
I'm going to split hairs on you here. Do you think he's a great prospect, or do you think he's a good
I
prospect?
think he's a good prospect.
And like I said, that was hair splitting, and that was.
You're so dramatic.
I know.
Understand.
Why do you think that you and I have now done multiple shows together?
That makes sense because I am very dramatic.
I'm going to end this show, or start winding this show down. The topic that you and I were disagreeing on right before we went live.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about it. Yes.
And I said, all right, well, we'll just stop and say this for the show. But I have a question for you first.
Yes.
How would you like to get through the holidays without having to make your mortgage payment, Megan?
I would love that so I can do more holiday shopping for my friends and family.
For your friends and family. Friends and family weekend up at 7 Brew. A double tie-in here.
I'm getting extra coffees because I'm saving on my mortgage
That's
payments.
Right. Well, hey, if Mackenzie Blackwood gets an extension, he might be looking for a fresh mortgage here. And Trusted American wants to help you refinance your home so that you don't have to make any payments until February. Go to trustedamerican.com. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments. And right now, they will cover the cost of your appraisal. That's a $650 value by itself. Go to trustedamerican.com or scan the QR code on the screen to see how much money they can save you today. All right, we don't have them clipped, but Megan, relative to the conversation that we were just having, I think it was time for everyone to move on. There's 2 videos that are on social media right now. One of Alexander Georgiev getting the big hat for the Avalanche in what ended up being his last start here. Detroit? Correct?
Yes, it was Detroit.
He gave a 7-word answer. 8-word answer. Great game tonight. Let's keep it going tomorrow. Last night, he's made the player of the game in the San Jose Sharks locker room. And it's a speech. Everyone worked hard. Guys blocking shots. Like Coach said, everyone contributed. I love everything. Let's do it again. Let's keep it going. And I said to you, Megan, I think those videos are very telling about what the relationship was like between Georgiev and the rest of the team here and getting a fresh start with a new group of guys. To me, I just think that it's one room, the relationship wasn't working anymore. The other room, there's optimism. You don't think that maybe these videos are quite as telling as I'm making them, bumping them up side by side?
No, and it's not because I think that everything was peachy keen with Georgiev in Colorado. I'm trying to think of an analogy that will help me. And I think of a boy who's really interested in a girl and he wants to impress her. And in the early onslaught of dating,
holy smokes.
In wooing her, he pulls out all the stops to impress her.
Yep.
But when they've been together, I don't know, their 7-year anniversary. No, not an anniversary, just 7 years. They've been together.
Years in.
It's more so not even an anniversary. It's just a mundane
day.
Tuesday.
Yep.
You're maybe not getting the flowers. You're
Yep.
maybe not getting the chocolates.
Yep.
Georgiev, locker room, big win, new team. I just see a little bit more from that versus this Detroit win. They didn't play a very good game. Georgiev played a very good game, but the Avs, it wasn't a really great Detroit game. It was just okay. It was good. So I don't know that I expect Georgiev to be bending over doing backward cartwheels. But the other thing we talked about,
cartwheels.
I know I'm saying things weird today. We're just gonna have to move past it.
I was like, is a backward cartwheel a thing?
I usually say backflips and cartwheels, and
Okay. All right. Yeah.
breezed past the backflips
Nope,
today.
that's all right.
Basically, one, I think there was a sense he was being traded. Now, I don't know that he had that sense, but I have to imagine when you look at Detroit and New Jersey, oh, they're giving Wedgwood the New Jersey game? They're giving me the Detroit game? I'm the starter. What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
That would be my brain if I'm Georgiev. But the other thing is Giovanni Smith was placed on waivers 24 hours before the trade intentionally so that he could clear them. And the Avs had flexibility to utilize him and reassign Nikita Prishepov and just bring Smith into the fold. There is, to my view, then a sense of knowing that this was happening before it broke on Monday. And I think just looking at the order of those starts, I imagine there was maybe some sense of knowing that Georgiev was on his way out when he played in that game, or at least by the time he finished it, like, well, why am I playing this game?
Well, and see, it's the fact that he told Sheng definitively, no, not definitively, but very forcefully, I didn't know it was coming. That,
like, generally, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like,
I would think that the average person would be able to put those pieces together. I don't know if Georgie did. He was always incredibly nice with us, but just an odd, quirky kind of guy. And I just don't know. And I think your analogy of the
it was a weird analogy.
No.
We don't have to hang on it.
No, I think you were onto something there. We're like, yeah, at the 2 weeks into a relationship, a week into a relationship, you're dating someone. Yeah, it's just a Tuesday, but you are going to stop and pick them up some flowers, an extra little treat, something like that. My wife, I took her wontons on Valentine's Day once because she doesn't like flowers. She loves wontons.
The reason this was hard is you bring her butterfly gummies on a Monday and Tuesday, so you might not get the analogy.
Butterfly gummies from Buc-ee's, just to be clear. But yeah, you get a couple years in, and it's like, yeah, well, we've been through this all the time. The part to me that I find weird about it, going back to the golden retriever analogy that you used earlier.
Yikes.
Where that was clearly someone trying to pull him back into the fold and saying, you and I are in this together. And I'm the breath of fresh air that's trying to be breathed into this room. And I'm bringing you along with me. We're going to reshape this. And Georgie just didn't seem to be interested in doing that, in my opinion, based on what we saw in the video. And then just to see his reaction last night, big smile. To me, that win against Detroit should have been a win that he was more excited about, because that was his win. He went out and earned that and only gave up one goal. And that should have been a big boost of confidence for him. And maybe you're right. Maybe he did see the writing on the wall and he knew, like, well, I'm not that excited because I'm probably not going to be here in 48 hours to enjoy this. So if that was the case, I'm with you. But if he truly didn't have any idea, I do think those two videos are very telling about his relationship with the rest of the room.
And the reason it's interesting is in post-game interviews, have heard Georgiev talk about the team in that way, with so many words, the things that they did well in front of him defensively to support him. And I think he's been thoughtful with that at times. So that's why I'm like, well, I've seen Georgiev talk about the Avs that way. And I do agree that this is definitely, it points to end times. And I can see then maybe why he'd be a little bit down. But back to the golden retriever part. Relentlessly positive? Is that optimistic? What was it that Sheng Peng used to describe Mackenzie Blackwood?
I think it was relentlessly optimistic.
Relentlessly optimistic. That's different. You can win games or you can celebrate winning. And I think it is okay to have people in your life who make everything joyous and really want to celebrate. All right, I'm getting carried away. Really want to celebrate the wins.
Yes, because so again, I don't think any of your analogies are off base. And again, I'm going to say something here that I hope I'm not overstepping on who Alexander Georgiev is, but I did feel like there was a lot of times where we talked to him after games and he would even he would make a point to say, like, oh, I separate what I do from everyone else. Like, I'm worried about how I'm playing. I can't worry about what they're doing. And I do think that is just, there's levels of that are true for the way that a goalie needs to perform. But I do also think that there were instances where he maybe separated himself too much from the overall success of the team. Again, not that he was more worried about his accolades and things like that. But I think that maybe there were some times where he went too far in that direction of just stay focused.
I see a lot of myself in Georgiev, and I can see that like hyper independence can actually make it hard to grow closer with people.
That I love the way you just said that. I love the
And
way you just said that.
because I agree, and I think Georgiev did this in positive ways. Like he was really critical of his Dallas playoff performance, whereas everyone else looking in on that is seeing the drastic impact of losing Val Nichushkin and Devon Taves. But Georgiev's just looking like, I wished I could have done more to help the team. And so I'm like, I see the positives of that in him wanting just to be better for the team. But similarly, I think sometimes the hyper independence aspect, it can make it hard to connect with people. I'm going to use the word intimacy. Feels like a weird place to use it in talking about hockey players and a team. But I feel like when you've got such a big group of people, being connected is so important. And you have to find ways around the hyper independence.
Well, and not just a big group of people, but a big group of people that rely on each other as much as a hockey team does.
You have to be intentional because it's probably not going to come naturally to you. And I think if you're a little bit introverted too, like myself, that can just be a little incompatible at the end of the day.
Let me finish the show by clarifying my wonton story. My wife loves wontons, specifically this one small place that is now walking distance from where we live. And my wife gets sad by flowers because they die. So she feels bad that they die. And then she feels bad that I spent money on them. So she's always told me, don't get me flowers. So this is a few years ago. She was in PA school and her and a friend were at the library late. And it was Valentine's Day. So I went to our favorite Chinese place and I got her favorite wontons. And then I went to the store and I bought a box of chocolates and I emptied the chocolates into a bag and I put the wontons in the chocolate box. So I then went to the library, took them to her, and I set it just like in a bag on the thing. And I was like, happy Valentine's Day. I love you, blah, blah, blah. Her and her friend were there and they were in the throes of studying. So I was just there for a minute and I left. And as I was leaving, she goes, thanks for the chocolate. And I was just like, because the chocolate was in the overall gift bag.
You didn't deprive her of the chocolate.
Right. Just in a separate place. And then like 3 minutes later, she's like, oh my God, there's wontons in here in a separate all caps text message. And I was like, yes, this went exactly as I was hoping for it to.
That's incredible. Hopefully too, it wasn't too much delay from her actually opening it. Because I'm sure they were warm.
They were, and I was actually worried that it was going to give it away when she grabbed the box because the box
hot.
was then piping hot. Yeah.
Nice.
So I don't know how she did, but actually the friend she was there studying with was the one who later got bangs that I told the story about.
She needed someone to give her wontons in a box of chocolates.
I should have brought an extra box of wontons in retrospect. But hey, so that was because there was a little bit of a mixed reaction in the chat when I said I bought her wontons for Valentine's Day instead of flowers. So I had to get a text. Do you have anything else?
No.
Do you have any other analogies for us?
No,
today,
I feel
Megan?
really weird about the direction I've taken some of this.
All right, that's going to do it for today. That'll do it for the weekend, kind of. We're going to divide and conquer tomorrow, Megan. You'll be up north. Teddy Bear Toss up at the Colorado Eagles tomorrow night. And I will be down at Ball Arena bringing you guys all of our regularly scheduled Avalanche content. Had a great show. Had a lot of fun talking to you today, Megan.
Goalies.
Big thanks to Sheng Peng for stopping by and talking with us and giving a ton of great insight that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Thomas behind the glass today. We're having you around more and more, Thomas, and I love it. Make sure you guys can see us and hear us. She is Megan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be back at it tomorrow. Avs and Eagles. Looking forward to it. Have a great weekend, everybody.